and welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. It's week one, is finally here, and we've got some real football to talk about this week. The visit of the Colts Liberty Whiteout weekend at NRG Stadium, the return of a team who took us to the woodshed a couple of times with an almost 60-point differential, so there's a lot to go in the Texans' favour. But to preview that and preview the season, we've got a returning guest, Mr. Graham Henderson. Graham, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, thanks. How's you?
I'm doing alright, yeah. Looking forward to some real football. I think it's after the draft, that sort of time period of waiting for it to come around. I think it's been a long one. So yeah, no, looking forward to seeing all the iterative improvements I think that the team have made, in which they have definitely done that. Looking forward to seeing how that shows up in the field and where that sits, in true league circles. So yeah, I think it'll be good. How's your off season been, and what's your kind of mood as we're in week one?
It like you said, it's been long. It's felt a very long overdue to get to the season. Tried my best with obviously busy life schedule to keep in touch with what's going on in like training camp and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I've not been able to watch any of the preseason games, but it's almost been a good thing because we keep getting wins. We keep eking improvement, but I've been catching up with the fallout from that. Just with a busy life schedule. But I'll be 100% committed to watching from Sunday on. No problem.
Yeah. Well, I think on a different time zone is difficult, I think, to try and watch a lot of these games. I sort of caught up with them a lot the day after. A lot is backup. A lot of it's not necessarily transferable into what you'll see week one on that opening kickoff, whether it be special teams, offense or defense. But certainly this week, I just want to thank everybody for sending in their questions and really kind of taken back by the response. So thank you very much. Some came in before asking and some coming in after. So we'll try our best to rattle through them as we tee up the season. I think feels like we've talked a lot of the potential storylines to death. So good for other people to set the content, set the direction, and we'll take it from here. So the first one was from D. Lloyd via Instagram, and he said, how would you rate Nick Caserio to this point, Graham?
I think he's done a good job, personally. He's taken a lot of time to maybe get rid of a lot of the dead wood, as some people would call it, or like the bad moves that the previous regime made. I'm maybe just speaking for myself there on that, but I think there's only like two guys left from previous, like Bill O'Brien, like draft picks and stuff. He's been doing a job to make it his team, and I think some of the moves he's made have been, they've been out there, but he's trying to really put a stamp on his team, and I think that translates into all through the building. I think there's a different vibe coming out of the organisation just now, and I think a lot of that is to reconnect with the city of Houston and the Houston Texans fan base as well. So I think he's been juggling a lot of issues that weren't necessarily his issues, but he's coming, and I think he's done a good job.
Yeah, I read an article today actually in the Houston Chronicle from Bruce Cabina, worth reading if you've not read it already, talking about just general fan engagement. I wrote an article this week on podcasttexans.com just looking at all the various facets of the franchise, from ownership to front office leadership, coaching staff, emerging young talent and star players, and we're in different spots from all of them apart from the last one, I think, or where it needs to be, and that takes time. But yeah, you're right, there is a huge fundamental sea change, I think, in just the general self-awareness of the club and everything like that. So I think, yeah, Nick's played a big part in that. A professionalism, I think, stabilised the ball club in a way that has meant it's earned a level of respectability that we definitely lost. I think that the fact that Jack Easterby's been kicked to the sidelines and is nowhere to be seen now, I think is a huge thing. Even if it's only symbolic on a surface level from what we can see, I think that makes a huge difference, and it goes back to that self-awareness thing, I think. And Caserio, to this point, to answer D. Lloyd's question there, for me, the salary cap, and I'll always have criticisms of him, it won't be till next year that we'll be some of it was inherited, some of it was self-made, some of it's overspending on guys who don't really make much of a difference on a Sunday, and you could carry that money over into future years. We're only got circa 56 million cap with only sort of 20-30 players under contract, so he's going to struggle to fit a 92-man roster and then get under the 53-man rule by the time we get to September next year. That's going to be a little bit of a struggle, so there'll be no big spending this year. I think that number was misquoted when Caserio was talking about 2 years in a row in the sort of spheres that he looks at. So next year's going to be incremental improvements again, and just by the way he's positioned it. But I think in terms of his talent evaluation, I think everything looks rosy right now. I mean, it's certainly robust in terms of building that talent base that was just completely removed from so many missed draft picks. Obviously, we've seen Blacklock, Sharpen, etc. go out last week, and for the right reasons. I think they just weren't up to scratch and where we need them to be at both positions. But both premium picks, Lonnie Johnson gone as well. So he didn't have much to work with last year. I think you can write off, apart from the David Culley thing, which I think is inexcusable, and he'll always have that on his resume. Salary cap here and there, but I think to this point. We'll see, but I would reserve judgment for Nick until the end of next year, because if we're in a position there where we're looking interesting, then fine. But this was always going to be the first year. Last year was a throwaway just by the circumstances, the Deshaun Watson stuff, etc. And the Deshaun Watson trade obviously was the biggest thing he's done to this point, and I think it was reasonable. Could you got more? Perhaps, but he valued clarity and certainty, and I think people just wanted to get under the rut, but. I'm pretty, I think it was a shrewd hire. I think there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd 100% agree.
So perhaps I'd probably describe him the third most important person in this organisation this year, and it's going to just be refreshing as hell to watch a new offence. Now, I don't necessarily think if you watch back his tape when he coached Andrew Luck and he called plays for Andrew Luck and he called him in college and then he brought him into Indianapolis, it wasn't great timed. And if anybody's listened to the podcast about this chronicling Andrew Luck, I suggest you do if you've not listened to that. It's just called Luck from the Athletic. There's a couple of snippets in there about him calling 48 passes when he knew Andrew was injured in a game and things like that, and there's a lot to prove, but people develop over time, and I'm willing to give Pep the benefit of the doubt. He's certainly probably one of the more coveted names on the coaching staff, certainly that Lovey's brought in since he's hire. But Purple City asked, how much faith do you have in the Pep Hamilton offense? And does he have more up his sleeve? And I think I know from people speaking in, there's a lot what you can put on the record and what you can't put. But a lot of people I do speak to off the record, I think they've seen enough to be enthused by the personnel that he's going to run out there. I think he writes a lot of pistol formations, which is a little bit kind of different. That's that intermediate point of the quarterback being between the shotgun under centre. He's run a lot of 12 personnel, one running back, two tight ends. That was a big part of getting O.G. Howard in, because basically they just didn't have enough blockers to try and run that system. They wanted to run play action off that. They want to get a full back in there. Troy Harrison's made the roster as an undrafted free agent. So it's going to look completely different. And even if it's not that great, I think it'll be refreshing to watch an offense that under Tim Kelly got really stale, Graham.
Yeah, it did get stale. But I think with Pep Hamilton, from what I've seen in the sources I look at, is he was purposely keeping the preseason offense like very shrewd and very undercover, not wanting to show too much of his hand, what they've been working on. I know I know there was that one article that I read that Davis Mills was very excited about what they've got to show, what they haven't shown yet. And that's good to hear and refreshing to hear. It could all just be bluster, just to get a bit of hype in the fans and stuff. But I do believe there is more that we haven't seen yet from this offense, and I am excited to see it. And if we can get that run game established by, you were saying there, getting in the extra blockers, and that goes a huge way to making your team more effective, I think, in today's game.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it's a bit of a sort of throwback old school to bring a fullback on. Teams have ran, or a lot of teams in the league don't carry one. But for the position that Mills is in, relatively unexperienced, if he doesn't have a running game, he's certainly not shown enough that he's just going to, basically threw caution to the wind, just say, look, we're going to throw it 40, 45 times a game. That's not the formula to succeed for Davis, in which we'll come on to, because we've got a lot of questions about Davis. But certainly the running game is key, and there's a couple of things we'll come on to that as well. But the next question we've got is from Matt Reed, who sent one in, who said, who's going to be the standout rookie, second-year player and free agent? So who's your rookie, Graham, that'd be the standout for you this year?
I reckon if I think he was named as RB1. Is it Damian Pierce?
Yeah.
Was named RB1, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if he translates his preseason games and production of what he did do in preseason, I think it's going to be hard not to look at him as a standout rookie.
Well, 10-1 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, I saw today, with a bookmaker. Not that we necessarily encourage gambling, but I think interesting. Both him and Derek Stingley were both 10-1 with a said bookmaker today, which I thought was reasonably short, particularly for Stingley, when it's so hard to win it on the defensive side when you're not a sack artist. You're going to have to rack up numerous interceptions to do that. But yeah, Damien, I think, could be the biggest breath of fresh air. Goes back to the Pep Hamilton question. I think he's certainly going to have a lot of pressure on him, and he's certainly not going to be hiding places, and he's certainly not got much quality behind him to relieve him. There's probably no, there's the depth chart comes out, and it's, what's the starting running back? You don't want him to have more than 15 carries every week because you want him to be fresher as the season goes on. You don't want to. He sits, particularly when he was sub or around the 1,000 carry mark a year in a very much truncated college schedule. So he's going to play more games this year. He's already played in preseason. He's already had a training camp. So I hope they're careful with him, because certainly it's all there, and I think he's certainly stolen the imagination of a lot of people. Now, they could build up to hype, and he could not necessarily live up to that, but certainly, if you can find 4th, 5th round gems on your roster, it starts to fill out a hell of a lot quicker than it does without that. So, touch wood, they be careful with him. It's a season where not everyone's on the line. You want to ease him into, don't put too much pressure on him too early. Let the kid have realistic expectations. But he's certainly the best running back on this roster, which is not saying a lot when you got Rex Burkhead and Darian Ngabwale, and we've just signed Doak, the former Cincinnati 7th-round pick from Miami. Paul Quesenberry came off the practice squad roster, so they're probably not quite sure what they've got at running back, but certainly Pierce, when he's in there, certainly looks like he runs. Angry runs, and he's quick as well. That changes direction. You saw in that San Francisco game where he bounced off a guy and then just cut an angle into the space was pretty elite in terms of that sort of burst. So it's kind of exciting to actually finally have a running back since Arian Foster. We've never replaced him.
We've not had that for a lot of years.
It's been a big gaping hole, and the misuse I talked about last week. You misuse him, Lamar Miller, etc. We never ever really filled that hole. So yeah, I think rookie for me, absolutely. 2nd-year player, I suppose you've got. I suppose if we put Mills aside, because we'll talk about him, I suppose from Nico Collins, Garrett Wallow, Roy Lopez, and Brevin Jordan's the only kind of. Michael Duomafor is a 2nd-year player, but wasn't drafted by us, so count him as well. But
Roy Lopez for me. He's obviously worked hard in the off season. He come back leaner and fitter. That's a guy who wants to come and work, and I think that'll translate this year. I just like the guy.
Yeah, well, he like in the same way, and I look at it. I think when you're going to go through tough times, you kind of need a bit of this, and it's a bit fluffy. But in the same way that Lovey encapsulates what a Texans head coach should be. I think Roy Lopez really represents the city, the Hispanic fan base really well. He is a completely jumped beyond expectations of a 6th-round pick out of Arizona, not a big program, wrestling background, etc., etc. But some of his tape towards the end of the year was pretty excellent. So if he can take that jump, and you need the guys to take that jump, and I think that's a big plus. I think Brevin Jordan needs to sort himself out, and he's had some bad drops, and he needs to be that sort of move tight end that can make space in short areas, create matchup problems against safeties and linebackers, and get you easy downs. Obviously, I think the big one's Nico Collins, because if he's not there, the pressure on Brandon Cooks is massive. So Nico has to show what he's shown in training camp to this point. Particularly last year, I know he got injured in Cleveland. It wasn't his fault, and then he took a while to get back, and he started to look like their pre-season against the 49ers. I thought he had a good had that good get up and go catch in the end zone against the Rams and stuff. So yeah, he's got to really pull out the bag, and actually for his frame and size and supposed physicality, he needs to be dominant at the point of attack and go up and grab the thing out of the air, because if he doesn't do that, then, you know, what is his skill? And I think that's got to be him. But I think, you know, he's got to be a relief guy for Cooks.
Yeah, you see me there pointing at the 80 behind this. You know, that's kind of how he's got to start playing his game, is kind of shadowing what 80 used to do for us, you know.
Yeah.
Be that big physical wide receiver and that. So, hopefully Nico can make the jump as well.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think, you know, Andrew Johnson's been out there, not been shy about kind of coaching him up and from training camp. So I think he's definitely one there. And free agent, this is a bit more of a trickier one, but of the free agent signings, standout, I think for that one, Ogo Okoronkwo, just from a speed edge rusher. I think if you're not sitting torching yourself every down every week, I think he'll flash just because he's a speed rusher, and you'll get clips, and a lot of people tend to like that. You know, Jacob Martin was liked far beyond what his play would suggest that he was liked, but I think he'll definitely bring in. They didn't spend really any money. I think if you want somebody to come in and be effective and justify money, I mean, their big ultimate free agent signing was AJ Cann at right guard. So if he comes in as solid and you don't notice him, you know, 9 plays out of 10, unless it's something positive, then I think that's probably one for me. Have you got any free agents that you're excited about? I mean, it wasn't a big class this year, but
it wasn't really. We'd be classing OJ Howard in there, wouldn't we?
Yeah, you know, I would say so. Yeah.
You know, like he could potentially be, depending on if he can get an uptick in his play, just because our tight end class hasn't been the greatest either for a few years now.
Yeah, it's the worst position on the team, I think. Yeah.
You know, like Pharaoh Brown has flashes of being a physical like tight end and that, but we need more consistency in that position, and he might give us that. So, for me, the one I'm hoping turns out to be a good signing for us on the free agency is definitely OJ Howard, because we need that tight end group to really step up. You know, there's been a few years we've been devoid of even having them as backup.
Yeah, I think if you can come in and do a serviceable job at blocking, easy for me to say, I think then that's probably the parameter of success for me, because I mean he lost his job ultimately in Buffalo to an undrafted rookie and a late round draft pick. They took him over him, you know, some cap reasons. He's getting some money from Buffalo. We were paying him the minimum. He ends up picking up $3.25 million this year. So he's a guy that's never lived up to his potential. So if he can give you sort of 40-60% of that, he's definitely probably an improvement on, you know, relying on Pharaoh Brown. But you really want him and Brown to be out there, you know, on either side of the formation or on the both side of the formation, you know, in goal-to-goal sort of situations. And I think if he can be serviceable, look, and I saw that clip on running, he doesn't look that fluid, to be honest, at training in the practice this week. So yeah, I think he could. He's one of those guys that it's always a cliche of low risk, high payoff. But Caserio was reserved in his comments. Said we've not got much committed to him. He's a good player. I think Lovey was higher, and I think it was more of a Lovey move. But I think Pep's obviously been, you know, with the failed trade for Adam Shaheen that came over from Miami, failed physical, cancelled. They were obviously looking for one, so he may do it. But if he's not active in week 1, it wouldn't surprise me. And if he gets cut at some point this season as well, it wouldn't surprise me. But if he is a plus for us, then it's going to be a big plus for this offense. Certainly, maybe not a long-term solution, but certainly one for that. So. Right, now we've got a raft of Mills questions, so we don't answer everybody's, but Kiwi, Texans, Sweden, Gareth Gordon, Paul Lambert, all asked a variety of questions on that one, and we got another couple today. UK or Texans _UK sent us one as well. In terms of, to summarise, Graham, I think what's a successful season for Mills? And how much time do you give him to either prove he is the guy or he isn't the guy? Is probably the summation of the questions.
I think he's under a lot of scrutiny. You know, he kind of got thrown in with the whole Deshaun Watson situation last year, where a lot of people are almost giving him like this 1 year window as this like the main starter. It's like he gets this, and if he doesn't deliver like even the playoffs, I feel, then people are going to be on his back, which is a lot of pressure for the young guy. You know, he didn't have a lot of football coming in last season. You know, like he didn't have a lot of college football. Then he came in to a bad franchise last season. He did okay. Most of his numbers, you probably agree, came in garbage time games, probably. You know,
Yeah, a fair percent. I've never actually worked at the exact percentage, but yeah, it feels like, you know,
there must be a lot.
30-40%, yeah, Rams game, Seattle game, you know, this kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to give him this year and next without putting too much pressure on him. I think a successful season for him would be hard to say, like if you rate it on a wins or how he plays sort of style. Like if it's like a 6-7 win season, is that because of Mills or is it because the whole team's improved? You know, like his yards. Like I seen in one of the questions, will he hit 4,000 yards? No, I don't see him hitting 4,000 yards.
Yeah, it's funny because he did, what was he was 2,600 odds, 2,700, just shy of, I think, last year in 10 games or 11 games. So, you know, if you do 17 per game, not far off it. But I think there's definitely a couple of fallacies. I think for me, well, one thing is a pet hate of mine, and I hope people just drop this into the season, is saying, well, he was the best rookie quarterback. Like, well, okay, but like none of those guys were particularly good, so therefore, what does that mean in the grand scale of it? Okay, I know people will always be kind of classed within their in their class that they come in with. So they'll always be compared to a point, but ultimately we play in the National Football League. We don't play against the rookie class every year, and that's the only team you play against. You play against the best of the best. So the best of the only thing that matters. Whether he was, you know, the fourth best rookie or the worst out of all the guys that came in, is kind of irrelevant now you're in season 2, because that's done now. It's a sophomore season. So, like, I hope people just drop that a little bit. I think that there is a bit of a fallacy in terms of the end of season rise, because if you, as I said, and people kind of dismiss this, and I've heard other people pick up this comment as well that I've made, that if you watch the San Francisco game, they didn't drive the ball once in that game. The only time they got a touchdown at Brandon Cooks was 2 big penalties. And so that's like the kind of barometer of where you need to be against an elite front four of a good defense that carries a team. So, you know, and I know it's year one, so it's almost like all that stuff. There was some highs, there was lows of hitting screen passes in the dirt, not being able to put up a point, not being able to drive at San Francisco. Both performances against Indianapolis, well, only one was him, but and he came on for Tyrod as well, so it's probably not fair against Indianapolis. So, bit of a fresh slate against Indy, and it's a fresh slate this season. I almost think you can almost dispel everything you've seen up to this point and just say this because he was so inexperienced, so there was going to be growing pains. He was thrust into it after Tyrod got injured in week 2 in Cleveland when he pulled his hamstring when he scored that touchdown. And at that point, we looked okay. So I think, what can you do from here on in as a player in this league? Have they done the most to surround them with pass catchers? Not really, no. Has he got an upper tier line in front of him? Potentially, but we'll see. But certainly on paper and how much they've played together, they've not played together, and that's cohesion is so important at that spot. So on that alone, I think it's important to remember that last year was going to be messy. So this year he's had a full training camp. He's had everything now. So long as if it's respectable, I think is one thing. Now, Gareth Gordon sent in a message, Graham, today actually, and he said, what would people rather? Would they want Mills to improve this year and take us to maybe 6 or 7 wins with a lower first round pick, or Mills fails and we get a top 3 pick again and restart with a higher rated college pick? What would you prefer out of those two?
There's no saying that even if Mills plays well this season, we're not going to go that way.
Yeah.
So really, I would like to see Mills. Excuse me. I'd like to see Mills take the step, push on. You know, his Mills' growth might be part and parcel with Damian Pierce's impact on the team. You know, how many times have we seen a quarterback come on leaps and bounds with confidence because he knows he's got a run game that he can rely on? So I would like to see him do well. I can still see the Texans, if there's a really good quarterback prospect there, and Nick usually picks the best player on the board. You know, if they are available, he might still pick them, and then that means we've got a really good backup to work on as well. The QB project could be a couple of years again for us, you know. So I would like him to have a successful season. You know, I want to give him this year and next year. I totally agree with you. The tape starts now on him. The film starts now since it's his team. So yeah, I want him to do well. And well, that's all I can really say is I'm on Mills to do well. Let get him behind him and stuff. So yeah, I'm quite passionate about that as well.
Yeah, no, I think as well. No, I mean, I think everybody wants him to do well because ultimately, if he shows this year that he can be a solid game manager at worst and see you through games, not lose you games, potentially win you a few, then the whole complexion of who you pick and how you build and who you sign changes instantly. And it puts almost you in contention to at least make a splash next year. Whereas I think the real timelines are probably 2024 by the time we're kind of in a position where we're kind of a clean slate in terms of salary cap and in terms of, you know, getting draft picks in the building and getting them to develop, you know. So we won't see John Mechie till next year for the first time, for example. So, you know, it's going to take a while for it all to come together. Just this being the first year of having, you know, premium picks, being able to, you know, go and sign some players that you want to. So, yeah, I think everybody would prefer him because he's going to be cheaper than a first round pick. He's now been in the building. He's tied to his coaching staff. He's tied to Pep Hamilton. So, you know, there's a lot riding on him, particularly in the coaching staff, because they've hitched their wagons to him to a degree. I just always question whether Nick Caserio, and he's, you know, you don't get many second GM jobs in this league, will he hitch his wagons? Will he put his name next to Davis Mills if he's not sure? Yeah. And I think we tread such a fine balance this year, Graham. I think of being out of the running for a top pick and kind of being sure what he is. And, you know, he might have a decent touchdown to interception ratio. We might win 7 or 8 games. I don't see it, but it could happen if it all goes well, I think. And you're kind of sitting there bubbling just on the edge of relevancy. That could happen this year. I don't think it will, but that could happen if he translates his game to a level of just unrivaled accuracy, ruthless in terms of passing, decision making, checking the line of scrimmage, setting the protections right, calling out the right, you know, checks at the line of scrimmage, making sure he sees it, the whole field clearer, and makes his decisions a lot faster than he did last year. If he does that, then he's got a chance to elevate, you know, people around him and his own game. But it's asking a lot, and I think that considering how many games he's played, I think some of the expectations of certain fans and certain takes out there is a little bit kind of premature and a little bit unfair on the guy, to be fair. So it's going to take him time to grow. I think you're right. He probably does need 2 seasons. I think he's been. I think what he needs to recognise, and what other people need to recognise, he's been given a really, really like amazing chance. Not many quarterbacks kind of come in and do okay, and then do many franchises say, right, we're going to roll with you next season. He's basically been said, you will play 17 games this year unless you get hurt. So that's the thing for me, that, you know, he's been given quite a rare, unique opportunity here in many senses, because, you know, Kyle Allen will come in, he'll do what he does, and he's all right, but he's certainly not a starting caliber quarterback in this league. So I think the world's his oyster. It just depends how much he's improved and how much can he compensate for having average talent around him, and how much does he grow, and where does that leave the team, the coaching staff, and the record at the end of the year. It'll all come out in the wash at some point as we get into January. But it is the biggest inflection point we've had in the team's history for the last 5-10 years.
Yeah.
So that a lot to unpack with Mills there.
There's always a lot with Mills.
That's it, and we're conscious of time as well as we're getting ready, as it's Wednesday for the Sunday game. So one of the from Gareth Gordon again, will our D-line be the best group on the team, Graham? It was certainly probably the toughest cut, obviously trading a second round draft pick, Minnesota for a six coming back, 7th going the other way. Do you think the defensive line will be, and do you think we've got multiple 5+ sack guys in there? That was from Back Row Texans as well.
Well, you're going to hope that Grenard's obviously fit to go all season, because I think in the games that he did play last season, he was pretty impressive. In the games I certainly witnessed him playing, he looked an impressive player. I'm hoping that Roy Lopez was said earlier. I'm hoping he's one of the guys that's our second year standout. So I'm hoping there is enough guys there to get 5+. I don't know if it's more than 2 people on that D line can do it, but I don't know if they're the best group on the team. I don't know who I would say is the best group on the team.
No, I think it's probably up there. I think in terms of depth, I mean, they've certainly kept a lot of bodies. I think Okoronkwo's probably got a chance to get 4, 5, 6 sacks in that range, just with speed, effort, clean up sacks alone. Jonathan Grenard, it's a lot's on his shoulders this year. You've obviously got Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison. I think Addison's probably the better just pure rusher out of the two, but certainly they'll make plays. Hopefully, touchwood, they stay healthy because they're good relief guys. And then I think ultimately, do you want to get, could Malik Collins or somebody like that, if we've got better pressure coming off the edge, get some more regular penetration up the middle and the A's and the B gaps between the guards and the centres and the centre and the guard and the tackle, and I think that's ultimately where you want to be. I think because this defence, as Lovey called it, the engine, it relies upon the front four being successful and getting home, and if they don't get home, then you've got a lot of rookies in the backfield they're going to have a lot of tests early. And I think this brings on to the next question, Graham. Jay Williams asked, do we need to sign another safety, and do you think Eric Murray is cut or traded before week 8? Now, he just had his contract reworked, so it was a conversion of due salary to signing bonus. It saved him, I think, $750K. So he's now $750K more expensive to cut than he already was when they already extended him. So I'm tempted to say no. But another question that ties into that quite well is, what do you think is the most, back row text and say, what do you think is the most position group that makes you most nervous? I would say safety.
Yeah, I was just going to say safety as well. It's got to be.
Yeah.
It makes you most nervous.
Yeah, I think tight end was one. I think O.J. Howard alleviates that a little. Obviously, you got Quintoriano coming back. Easy to say for some. I'm looking forward to a commentator too getting that horribly wrong at some point. But yeah, I mean, Eric Murray, I think he's now more expensive to cut. Does that mean he won't cut him? No, they did that with Whitney Merciless, who's a big part of that $65 million, leading the league in dead money figure. So, Caserio's not shy to cut bait. I think you're asking a lot of a guy who's Jonathan Owens, who's kind of showed in small flashes. He's like kind of Tavir Thomas in a way that, he's shown some good flashes, but doing that over 17 games is a lot more than being a late season spot filler when expectations are low. So, safety for me, Graham, I think is one of the spots that, Jalen Petrie's going to have a lot on his shoulders early, and I think he's capable of it. But he's a slight of frame guy, and he's going to be asked to do a lot. Just like how some of the criticism was with Justin Reed, he was trying to compensate for the guys around him, and I think Jalen Petrie could, if he's not careful, get caught into that category of trying to direct traffic and be the organizer back there. Yeah,
he could suffer for other folks' failures, and if you were to say it in another way. But he might be slight of frame, but that's the whole setup for Lovie Smith, isn't it? It's to have like guys who might not be athletically big, but just faster. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you want them to drive on the ball. Yeah,
buzzing around the ball, doesn't he?
Yeah, from a zone coverage predominantly position. But we'll see how that changes, and I think that was Vera sent in as well. How do you think the Tampa 2 as one NFL commentator said, that's how a good way to annoy Lovie Smith if you call him a cover 2 zone team, because I think he will change it this year, and that was Vita's question. How do you think that'll change? And I think that a bit more particular to the Colts, which we'll come on to, but it ties in nicely to that one. I think they'll run a bit more cover 3 at times with 3 safeties on the field. I think there'll be an element of nickel and dime coverages that are disguised and roll out to others post-snap or just pre-snap from the post-snap look. And I think they will try and be more, and they've got the personnel to do that this year, they'll try and be more complex, because if you look at the early rungs of last season, it was terrible to watch. It was literally, it was static. The linebackers we've got, hopefully Christian Harris can come in and be more athletic, give us that 4.4 speed that he's got in the sort of intermediate level. Kirksey's a weakness. This system relies on quality side-to-side athletic linebackers, and I think that's why you saw Lovie Smith was so delighted when they drafted Christian Harris, because they need it badly, and it was pretty poor at times, and it got more complex as the season rolled on. I think we'll have to see if this defense is going to be a negative for this team to really kind of blend coverages, be relatively in disguise to quarterbacks. Now that's going to be hard to do week one against Matt Ryan, etc., and some of the guys will come up against this year, but I think it'll need to be more complex than it was right from the off this year, because last year was too simplistic. You saw that Thursday Night Football was one of the worst, one of the defensive performances I can remember for a long time, just how wide open the zones were. The road game at Arizona last year, just nowhere near fucking good enough for this level. Yeah, so it was a difficult one. But the other side of that question is, what position group makes you most excited? Do you think defensive line, or is there another one, Graham, that you think could excel this year?
I'm interested to see what the O-line. I'm excited to see how the O-line has improved again. Every year seems to be a marked improvement from. We had a really bad O-line just a couple seasons ago. You know, it was interconnected, and people were switching out and moving over and switching in, and I think that ultimately led to the demise of Matt Sharpen, because he didn't know who he was on that O-line. Yeah. You know, so I think I'm excited to see how well the O-line performs this year, if they're left in the positions that, you know, like they're picked, you know, like that is their positions, and that's a set position. Yeah. So you're always excited to see what you can do over the course of 17 games when you're allowed to get into a rhythm of playing your position.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, in an ideal world, for 17 games you have Laramie Tunsil, Kenyon Green, Justin Britt, AJ Cann, Titus Howard, and those guys play every snap. But in the real terms, there will be injuries at times. Yes, Justin Britt has shown us that he won't. I think Scott Quisenbury, I need to get off the three brothers right, but Scott Quisenbury on the practice squad, ready made. Justin McCree's sitting there on the depth chart. I know people made comments about that over Kenyon Green. I think Kenyon Green, and that was another one of the questions from Kusi Delagamone, asked, is Kenyon Green good to go week one? There's been questions about his conditioning. And my thought, Graham, is if you don't play on week one, then trying to get a guy whose conditioning is in question, you can't put him out in Denver week two with a higher altitude, because it's a real thing.
You'll be gassed.
Yeah, I've experienced it myself, and it really does take your breath away. It is quite something, that altitude impact. So I think he's going to have to roll him out week one, unless you're basically kind of committing to McRae for a couple of weeks to keep the seat warm, let him get up to speed. But ultimately, when you're in season mode, there's not a lot of opportunities to improve your fitness. You know, you're maintaining at that point rather than, you know, unless you're doing a lot of extra, you know, gassers out on the playing field after everybody's hit the lockers. So hopefully he's doing everything he can, because, you know, 50th overall pick, a premium pick at a non-premium position, but it was exactly what we needed. And I think, you know, he is again an inflection point of how well we can run the ball, because there's a potential to him to be our best run blocker as a rookie, which kind of more says about the rest of the line. But ultimately, we need that line to come together for Mills' sake, for Kenyon Green's sake, for Titus Howard's sake in terms of long term, if he gets extension, because he's going into his fifth year extension, and he won't want to play on that fifth year next year. So, you know, there's a lot riding on it, I think, and then AJ Cann's your big signing, so you want that. Does Justin Britt make it? I don't think he necessarily plays 17 games. I think he looked cooked at times last year. He's obviously a big locker room guy, and that was a question from GM Fanatic. Does Jimmy Morrissey look like a starting centre? I think Quisenbury, like I said, will take snaps before him.
Okay.
I think I did like the acquisition of Jimmy when they signed him off the Raiders practice squad last year, and I highlighted some of his film. I thought it was good, but, you know, he was playing next to Cole Toner. He was playing next to you know, guys that aren't here right now. So he may well have it. He's back on the practice squad, which is good to see. So, he may well do it, but there's definitely going to be opportunities for other people to play centre. And I think, that linebacker, pass rusher are probably three of our biggest needs as we go forward, because you need to get those positions right. Having a solid centre is something that can make a huge difference. So, absolutely. In terms of the broader outlook, Richard Hawks asked, do you think the Texans make the playoffs?
No.
No. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah.
No, we've spoke about this before on message and just before we come on. This is a season of managing expectation. It's easy to get caught up in the hype, that pre-season build-up. But no, I don't think we make the playoffs, but I think if we improve a couple wins, maybe 2 wins on last season, we're obviously moving in the right direction. But I can't see it making the playoffs.
Yeah. I think with the extra game now, so your 4 wins a 5-win season, your 5 wins a 6-game season. If we win 6 games and look good at times, and maybe there's injuries play a part, maybe there's other factors that mitigating winning as many games as you can. I think having the early bye this year is a real tough one. And then you're on the road to Vegas. Of your first 5 games, 3 of them on the road. One of them's Denver, Russell Wilson's first game. So it's a really kind of tough stretch. And then you've got that November into December game where you play Miami on the road, you play Tennessee on the at home, I think, at that point, because you play them on Christmas. So they're slightly later in the pack. But then you've got Kansas City. You've got the Deshaun return. You've got the trip up to Dallas. There's a real tough stretch of games there that you could see potentially tailspinning the season and the record. So, yeah, and I think that was what Paul Lambert said, best outcome winning 5-6 games, but a growing sense of professionalism and progress. Is that success for this season?
Yeah, 100%. If we can cast off the cloak of the last couple of seasons, then I think that's a huge progressive step for the franchise as a whole.
Yeah.
And with better professionalism, you can attract better talent. They see you as a team on the up.
Yeah.
A team that they want to be a part of to help get over the next step. But if you're a non-professional outfit, who wants to come and play for you?
Well, that's it. Yeah, I think there's been a reputation rebuild as well as a playing staff quality rebuild as well. I think that's been a big part of it. Lovey's obviously done a huge part to restore that, I think. So week 1 against the Colts, I think everybody's kind of really aligned. Somewhere in the region of 4 to 6 wins. Could you get 7 or 8? Quite possibly. Any team can do that. Just have to. You get a bit of luck. The schedule falls your way. Key opponents' injuries. Anything can happen, and that's why this league is what it is, because there's never short of a storyline. There's always intrigue at every level of the season right through, and when you're talking about the league 6 months out, because it just keeps pumping into the news cycle, and it's astute at doing so. Will we shock the Colts week 1? That was from Back Row, Texas as well.
I don't know if it's going to be so much of a shock. I think I mentioned to you, I don't think the Colts have won their opening game for a few years.
5 years. Yeah. Not one under Frank Reich, yeah.
Yeah, so if anything, the shock will be if they beat us week 1 with that poor opening week record. So we could flip it to the positive and be like, look, the Colts are going to be shocked if they win their opener.
Well, they lost to Jacksonville. They've got a terrible record in Jacksonville. As I said at the start, we were sort of 58 points differential aggregate between the two teams. They put up 31 us both times. Couldn't handle Jonathan Taylor, the guy who was infamously picked 1 pick after Ross Blacklock. So I think, I think you can, when you go up against a team who doesn't have under their head coach a great record week 1, you're always better playing good teams early, because you can catch people. No team truly knows, or no coaching staff truly knows how good they actually are until the live bullets start flying. And I think that's the point where you can catch teams. You can, we're running out a new offense. We're hopefully going to have a revision of this defense in many ways. So if anybody's putting drastically different stuff on tape week 1, it should be us. So that gives you hope that you think you can go out and do that. But I think a question from Vida and where this game may be decided as it was when certainly in the 2020 game, the infamous one where Nick Martin snapped the fumble or fumbled the snap rather on right at the goal line when we could have gone up. Was all part of the interior O line not holding up against Buckner, Grover Stewart. You've got Ngakwe, Kwity Payne on the outside. So can we handle them up front from an offensive point of view? Can we handle the defensive line? That was from Vida. Graham, what do you
think? Does this not fall back into it all depends on how good your running game is? Like if you can make these guys go in the back heel slightly, then it gives you a chance to handle them better. You know, I know they're gonna make plays for the ball every play. Like that. That's a very tough like line of guys that you just. You know, that's a fearful roster to look at. But if you can, like in that game when Nick Martin snapped that ball, there wasn't a lot of faith in the running game in that season. I don't believe.
Well, there hasn't been for at least the last 2 years.
So you know, those guys, you know, their ears are up. It's the last play of the game. They know they can get after us, but if you can establish your run game in this season and this game against them, you know, that always puts guys on the back foot to me. You always see defenses being that little bit slower and getting there. So I'm hoping that we can handle them, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I think the injury or the potential omission of Darius or now Shaquille Leonard, I think is a big one. There's a big kind of underrated storyline. I think he's moving into the Mike linebacker spot when he was out on the edge of the three. So that's a role change for him. I think there's got to be, as you said, I think you're spot on, Graham, the run game's got to keep defenses honest, because if they just sit back and you can't run 5-on-4 up front, then you're in a position where you become predictable. So the balance of the offense, particularly against dominant fronts, we talked about the 49ers last year, we couldn't run it, not been able to run it at all for the last 2 years, so it's just such a big storyline. I think based on what you've seen in pre-season, just in terms of what these guys are being asked to do, I think it's a lot simpler. I think you said that Sharpen probably ruined his career by that scheme because it was too complex. There was just a lack of clarity, I think, on roles, it's on certain plays, or there was too many options for people. I think running this sort of predominantly power scheme, they showed a lot of kind of dual plays, sort of two double teams up front. If they can go and dominate and assert their will on another defensive line, in part, not every down, but it's going to balance out this offense incredibly to a point that it will make it feasible to you want them to come down and try and stop the run and fill the box, take a safety down into the box, and then that opens up your passing game. So they work in unison, but I think the short to intermediate passing game's got to keep them honest. You want to try and get their athletic linebackers. It's a quality squad the Colts have built, but you hope you can catch them cold. I think the biggest question, another one from Vera, and we'll finish up with this one pretty much, Graham, is can they keep a lid on Jonathan Taylor? Because he ran it all over them last year.
Yeah, he ran all over us. I remember being at the game last year at home, and it was a massacre, really. So the chances of completely hushing him down are very slim. He's just too good a back, isn't he? I think we'll agree on that.
He's always going to get some.
Yeah, it's just limiting how much how many yards he gets to have. So it's going to be very hard to keep as much of a lid on him. I don't know what we're even going to limit him to. I could even hazard a guess he probably will get 100 yards.
Yeah, I think is there not a stat there that the team that keeps the other team under 100 yards rushing is like a 70% win rate or something. So that's like kind of the magic kind of line that you want to be under. Is that possible with a back? and a line. Obviously, left tackle's a weak spot. I think you can get after them at left tackle. But yeah, can we be stout against the run? 'Cause I always remember that Cleveland game. And don't get me wrong, Cleveland with that line pretty settled. A couple of changes this year, and we'll see that week 13 with the return of Deshaun. But they just absolutely just dominated us man for man. I think one of the things that you have picked up on the preseason is this is a much more physical, better tackling football team. Now they'll have to be incredibly disciplined because they're going to have to make up for the lack of game records. We don't have a Buckner. We don't. Thankfully there's no T.Y. Hilton or anything that's kind of haunted us over the years. Can Derek Stingley insert himself against Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, Pittman, etc.? Can we win that battle? There's a lot of battles out there, and I think you can. I'm always cautious doing too much predictions because you can sit and get into the weeds about predictions in this this league, and these games go off in a very unexpected direction. I think so. I think I have a sense that we can do it. Often when I support two teams of different sports on one day, seldom do they both win. But I've got a feeling that we can maybe get a result on Sunday. But it's going to be good, I think, Graham, of just a general sense of progress, development of young players, and showing a clear path forward that we didn't have last year.
It feels like a breath of fresh air almost to me, watching it.
I'm not dreading the games. I think, and at times last year I was dreading them when Sunday rolled round. And you wait the off season, you long for it to come back. You want to sort of celebrate, the Sundays, and it's a bit of a ritual for people. If you're at the tailgate, if you're listening to this, and you're driving to somewhere before the game. If you're driving to the game, you're listening to this. It's good to have it back. And I know they've sold 60,000 tickets this year. There's definitely a raft of tickets that they were sort of discounting. There was kind of deals and stuff that they were doing to try and engage people. So hopefully the in-stadium experience will be better, because you and I were both at the Jets game last year and it was like a funeral. It was not a good game. There was no atmosphere, etc. So you want that to try and be an element, and Lovey's been a big part of that. The franchise, the ownership, everything. There's been a lot of engagement. So hopefully, even if the results aren't there this year, if there's a more unified front between the club and the fans and players working well, I don't know how long Lovey will be. He'll definitely be here next year. But long as there's enough progress and enough stability around Davis Mills to get an assessment of what he truly is. So there's no doubt, because people are going to small sample sizes, extrapolating, proclaiming loads of things. It just isn't realistic based on the data set we've got. But I think of all the things, if we see unity, Graham, and then we see a clear assessment on Davis Mills, I think it will be a positive season.
Yeah, totally agree.
And you're going to a couple of games, or you're going to a number of games this year? You're making the trip?
Yeah, well, so far I've got Raiders away booked.
In Vegas, nice. Right.
Titans.
Expensive on that.
Yeah, Titans, then Eagles.
Right. The Thursday, that's all prime time.
That's all set.
Yeah, prime time Thursday night's always It's not quite a Sunday night, but it's games different under the lights. They've got a different feel to them. So yeah, I think they've loaded up that roster this year. So I think they went from the start of the off season to kind of feeling like a winnable game to one that I'm probably less confident on now. And that's a kind of stretch with Washington either side that you kind of hope they could maybe pick up some momentum before we go into that sort of kind of really sort of grueling 6-7 game stretch at the back end. But yeah, no.
Well, that's what you said. You said it earlier on. Like there's a stretch after the bye that's a really tough stretch for us. And like you said, Raiders away, but then we've got Tennessee at home, then Philadelphia on a short week, and so we'll have been battered about by Henry, and then we've got this barely improved Philadelphia Eagles squad coming in. That's going to be a real tough 3-game stretch. That one alone.
Yeah, I think if you can get to the bye with 2 wins, that will be a reasonable start. If you go 2 and 3 at the bye, don't know what the Raiders will be this year, but I think going on the road's always difficult. And then you've got the Washington game at home, and then ultimately, I think a big thing of how this can swing this season. If Jacksonville pull it together, I think that that could potentially knock us down a few pegs if they can. If Doug Peterson can't pull that together, he won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, who didn't do anywhere else apart from under him, and he got the best out of him. So you'd think with a raw talent level, he can get more out of Trevor Lawrence. And then I think the Titans have got some holes. I think, time's going to catch up with Derrick Henry at some point. This might be it. He missed time last year, the most he's missed in his career till this point. Harold Landry was their best pass rusher, I think, arguably out for the season with ACL. There's a lot of holes in the roster. Tannehill's not been the same since he lost his offensive coordinator, taking the Atlanta Falcons job. So, there's a lot of change in the division. I think the Colts are potentially the cream or the top of the class. So we will find out a lot about ourselves, hopefully on week 1, and hopefully we come out with a win and we're sitting here next week talking 1-0. But Graham, thank you very much for joining. We whistled through those questions reasonably quickly, but enjoy the season, mate. I'm sure we'll be speaking plenty. Good to have football back, but thanks for your time.
No, thanks for having us on again, and look forward to conversing all through the season with you.
Yeah, that's it. Hopefully it'll certainly feel like it's going to be worthwhile and it's something to be involved with this year, because it's not been like that for the last 2 years. But thanks everybody again for listening. Thanks everybody sent their questions in. Great to kind of go through some alternative content rather than trying to set the agenda. It's been pretty fixed, but we'll have answers. We'll have live tape. We'll have live games. We'll have live results and what is everybody's judged on this in this league. It's a results business, and see where this team is heading. But thanks again for listening. Check out the website, podcasttexans.com. We'll have a game report up there on Monday. Back up the podcast on Monday. Give us a like, share, Facebook. If you've got somebody that supports the Texans and they don't listen, just give it to one person. Ping it on. That's all I ask. Hope we try and grow this season. But thanks again for listening, and hopefully we'll be back next week to talk about a 1-0 Texans team. But thanks again for listening. I'll speak to you next week.